Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm glad to be joining you today from New Hampshire. We're kind of all joining from all over. And where I am in New Hampshire, it's the unceded land of the Abenaki peoples or the Abenaki people. My name is Liza Lowe. I'm affiliate faculty at Antioch University, New England, and I'm the director of Inside Outside, which is a professional network for educators who are using nature, place, and the outdoors for teaching and learning. And I'm never totally sure who needs this still, but here's a little tutorial for Zoom so that you can share in the chat box. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And if you choose to everyone in the drop-down menu, then we'll all get to see you and kind of meet you in this way through the chat box. Can you advance the slide, Sheila? Thank you. So as I mentioned, I work at Antioch University, and we are grateful to the George B. Storer Foundation, who provides funding so that we can offer amazing webinars such as this to you for free. Next slide, please. And here's a little bit about Inside Outside, our professional network. Our website I'll put in the chat here, where you can find lots of resources, and we have a calendar on the website that shows you upcoming events. So there's another free webinar happening, I think not next week, but the week after, for a new book that's coming out. So I hope you won't miss that. And the recording for this webinar will live on our YouTube channel. So you can find that on the website as well, and just all sorts of resources to support you in your work with children and teachers and nature. Next slide, please. And there's a spot on the website where you can join us, which just means there's no like fee or anything. It just means that then you get our monthly newsletter and details about professional development opportunities that are coming up. So I invite you to check that out. And also you can find information about your local chapter of Inside Outside. So just a way to gather with educators more locally, but also we can share with you what's happening in Minnesota and in Illinois and other regional networks that exist across our country. So thank you again for joining us, and I'm going to turn this over to Sheila. Hey.
Yep. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Liza, for having us today. I'm Sheila, and I come to you from Minnesota, and I'm super excited to talk about spring with you and get really excited about it. And yeah, and so we're going to get going in just a moment. We'll both introduce ourselves, and then we will have some time to talk. But I'm Sheila Williams-Ridge, and I use she, her pronouns. I work at the University of Minnesota. I'm the director of the Child Development Laboratory School. We serve about 240 children from about 3 months to 5 years old. And part of our program is an outdoor focus program, and I have been working in the field for almost 25 years. So I'm very excited to be here with all of you tonight.
Yay. Okay, you can advance it. Thank you.
Okay. Or Megan, do you want to just introduce yourself? And then
yeah. Oh, sorry. I was going to introduce us in the next slide. I'm good.
Okay.
Yes, I am Megan Gessler, and I am the Little Trees Program Supervisor at the Morton Arboretum in Lisle, Illinois. And this is my 5th year there, and I had 7 years before that in Yorkville. And I have a master's in education from Antioch University with a certificate in nature-based early childhood. And yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you guys about the Environmental Kinship Guide today.
Hey, so to get us started, I learned, just one of my daughters just told me that it's World Water Day. So happy World Water Day, everyone. If you have any water near you, I have a glass here because I knew I was going to be talking, but maybe you could take a sip, think about where the water came from, its journey. Maybe the last time it came down, it was, in a part of the snowpack, or in Minnesota, we have a lot of snow. How it came to your cup or your bottle, and just give a moment of thanks for water. It's one of those things that ties us all together. And it's something that the children love. And so throughout our presentation tonight, we're going to show you many of the ways that they love water, especially in the spring. And if you do anything special to celebrate, or if you did anything special to celebrate World Water Day, you can enter it into the chat. Or if there is a thing that you like to do in your family to celebrate water, you can enter that too. We're really excited to get started.
Right. Well, cheers, Sheila. Thanks. There's a lot of good beverages that have water in there as well. So I hope you all have something to drink while you sit back and watch us today. Thank you so much. Well, Sheila and I are part of the Environmental Kinship International, which is a group of these fabulous people that you see before me and before you. And I'm in the upper left-hand corner. That's me standing outside with my mouth open wide. I know you're all singing that, right? And to my right is Amanda Higgins. She is from New Zealand. To her right is Anne Mead. She is also from New Zealand. Lower left is Sheila. Next to Sheila is Amanda or Heather Fox from Nebraska. And next to Heather is Claire Warden from Scotland. So you can see that we came together from all over the place because we really saw a need to think globally about how we look at nature-based education. So in other words, what ties our work together? How can we share what is happening all over the world to strengthen our profession, because we know this good work is happening everywhere. So that the common denominator that we found in the work that was going on is that really kinship is at the heart of all of our work. And by fostering kinship with the natural world, we can build an understanding of how everyone and everything is connected and interrelated. And so we went on this big 2-year journey and deep dive of how we can look at our approach to educating and learning about, in, with, and for the whole of the natural world. So how can we look at kinship as a framework or a guide for learning with nature? So we chose to focus on learning about nature, which really is that natural inquiry and study, learning in nature, which is all about the affordances, learning with nature, which is about the relationship, and then finally learning for nature, which is grounded in guardianship or taking action on behalf of the natural world. So you can kind of see this 4-pronged holistic approach is depicted in this amazing graphic. It's actually an intertwining knot because we feel really, really strongly that, like much of the natural world, learning does not happen in isolation or in a linear path. And that's one of the things that we found on our 2-year journey as we were discovering how we wanted to depict this. And our learning or coming to know is all interrelated, and all the facets are equally important. Yeah, so we took that 4-pronged approach and we wanted to really focus in on learning about, in, with, for the natural world from the child's perspective. So with each learning mode, there is an engagement style. So if you are thinking about learning about nature, maybe that's the study. And from there, there's a concept, which is organizing information regarding the natural world. So what does that look like, right? And so an observable could be comparing and sorting natural items. And that's what it looks like from the child's actions. And we really wanted to focus on what this looked like from the child, because that's why we're doing the work that we're doing. And so what you see in front of you is our outline, and it's a 2-sided graphic that can be attached to a clipboard for easy reference in the field or as an easy documentation tool. I like to use this with my college practicum students who are observing a class in action, and they are amazed at how many things they can check off as they are observing the children. You could use this with stakeholders, admin, parents, teachers. Honestly, I would love to hear more about how you could envision using this tool. So please put it in the chat. And also, once you go on to environmentalkinship.org and download a copy, it will ask a question if you would like to be part of our community of practice. And we would love to hear how you're utilizing this or what is happening in your neck of the woods, so that we can share stories and give more examples of what this looks like from children all over the world. And we try to be as all-encompassing as possible with our examples and representing what this could look like in different habitats, different cultures, different socioeconomic communities. But we recognize that we cannot encapsulate everything. So we did our best. Yeah, and we just love to hear your feedback.
All right. So now that Megan has given that wonderful overview, we're both going to share some stories about what this looks like in action and think about where these experiences connect to the framework. So if you just to like get our brains thinking about curriculum for the spring, what are you looking forward to that can only happen in spring? And so you can see mine on here is maple syruping or tapping maple trees. There will be very little syrup, but there will be a lot of sap. And we hope to get a little bit, enough to have a treat for the class. And it is one of those things that, you know, thinking through our kinship, we talk about the care of the tree, we talk about being gentle and making sure that the tree is healthy and all of those moments. And so Megan and I today are going to talk to you about a few other examples, and then mostly from the Midwest. So she's in Illinois and I'm in Minnesota. So there'll be a lot of examples of like mud and puddles and rain and gardening and all of those things. And we'll add a resource guide at the end of the presentation with some of the tools and some of the books that we highlight. Megan even put in a recipe in there. But if you think of any questions while we're going along, please enter them into the chat. And then we'll reserve a little bit of time at the end for questions and hopefully answers or just dialogue between us. This is something that we are very passionate about. And, you know, it's so important to see learning in every moment with children. And so hopefully this gives you more to think about when children are at play, in addition to other developmental domains. So we're gonna start with some of Megan's fun stories from Illinois, and I'm excited to talk with everyone about it a little bit more.
Yeah, thank you. Now I'm hungry for pancakes or fry bread or something. I haven't had dinner yet, so that maple sap looks really, really good. um, So we started our presentation talking about water, and I'm going to continue that discussion because water is so prevalent in Illinois in spring. And one of the many blessings of exploring rain is following the movement of water. And in this particular case, my students were completely obsessed with storm drains, and I do mean obsessed. They were shoving everything they could find down these drains, leaves, sticks, whatever, nuts. And at first it was super annoying, I will admit. But then I had to acknowledge that this was an emergent interest or a schema at play. So I fed that fascination, which reflects our guides learning about nature, and that you can see that on the slide. And I added some loose parts to explore. So I gave them incline by providing those boxes that you see in the picture, and they explored gravity. I gave them appropriate materials for the drain. So I gave them ice cubes, like old school ice cubes out of an ice cube tray. I don't think they'd seen that before. And it's actually not easy to roll a square ice cube down that corrugated tube. So that was pretty cool for them to figure that out. And pitchers of water. And then I gave them flashlights so they could look down below to see where that was all going. And so by providing the additional provocations other than what nature had already provided, they were really able to extend that engagement that they were in. And by the way, there are storm drains everywhere, no matter where you're at and what habitat, there are storm drains. Excellent. So their fascination did not stop here. They wanted to find other drains to see where they led. So we scribed a letter to our facilities manager, and the children thought up everything to say to him to see if we could get a map of all the drains within the Arboretum. So there's 1,700 acres at my Arboretum. There's a lot of drains. So what he did was enlarge a map of the nearby drains for the children to highlight and plan and map out their hike accordingly so that we could find all of the drains. So talk about your pre-reading skills. They were getting really good at mapping. And through this planning, the children became active stakeholders in their learning journey. So this is where that image of the child really comes into play. They are totally capable. And this type of activity really helped establish a sense of place. Where else do you see drains when you leave the Arboretum? Do you have any near your home? Are there any near the grocery store? I wonder where that water goes. So children would come back and tell me about the drain outside of grandma's house or by the local Walmart or something. And this is also a great way to start talking about the water cycle. So one day after it rained, we noticed that the rain was flowing through a culvert. And when it rains, it really changes that level of water in our drainage dishes. So this observation really indicated that environmental awareness of changes in the natural world. They saw what was happening around them. They noted the changes. And that's really, honestly, if you think about it, the foundation for a future understanding of climate change. So we decided to follow that water. It ran from the drain, under the road, to the stream. Go ahead. You can forward it. There you go. And back under the road. But wait a minute. Uh-oh, log jam. The children noticed several large logs blocking that culvert. And I said to them, I wonder what will happen if those logs start to block the water, if we get more logs. And the children started to think, and then they responded, the water will flow and it'll block the water. I wonder what will happen if the logs block the water. The water will flow over the street and then we can't get to school anymore. Heavens, we cannot get to school. I mean, how many children say that? Most children are like, yes. Block the street. So the children began to pull out those logs, and they were clearing that drain pipe and making sure that the water had a place to go and wouldn't block our roadway. And so later that day, when the parents came to pick up in that same area where we had the drain, that they were shoving all the sticks and leaves and acorns down, their little siblings were standing there waiting, shoving all the things down the drain. And then, wait, whoa. These kids came back and said, oh, no, you don't want to do that because then it'll block it up and the water won't have anywhere to go. Light bulb moment, right? That's one of those moments where we silently cheer in the background. Yes, they made a connection. And then from there on, they just kept noticing anytime that there was a drain blockage, they wanted to get the rakes. You can see them in that picture on the right, and they're getting the leaves out of there. And they just became agents of positive change for nature. So yeah, next slide, please. Okay, switching gears, ephemerals. Ephemerals are starting to pop up right now. I don't know if you've noticed. We've got skunk cabbage. We've got, chives. The kids love eating chives. Well, as my students were chatting about the ephemerals that were starting to pop up one spring, I gave them some waterproof flower guides as part of a scavenger hunt, and they started chatting amongst themselves and comparing and classifying and sorting and talking about shape and talking about size and working on their language development and their math and geometric shapes to match the plants. And also a special note, that guide that you see on the right, you can order that for different regions around the US. They are adventure quick guides. They're my super favorite. They're spiral, they're child friendly, tough material, place-based to your region. They're usually color coded, so you can't see it on this picture here, but there are tabs on the right, so you can look up the flower or the bird by the color. So they're fantastic. Thank you. And don't forget that guides are great pre-reading skills and confidence building in their knowledge base. Thank you. So another spring activity that comes from rain is wet chalk exploration. All you need to do is provide a bucket of chalk, some hammers, paintbrushes, and chalk is honestly better, I feel, when it's wet. And then children can explore the properties of solids and liquids as the rain comes down and turns that chalk into liquid watercolor. Oh, the hammers that you see in these pictures are actually lobster hammers. My friends on the East Coast clued me in on this, so you guys might, some of you might already know this, but we don't get a lot of lobsters in Illinois. But they are like a really easy first step in a tool. They're lightweight, safe, and inexpensive. And this was just a great activity to get the wiggles out, use our full body, and explore the rain and open-ended material in a nice large area. Thank you. It's loading. I don't see the picture yet.
Meg, while that's loading, those adventure quick guides,
Yeah,
are they all available on one site?
I mean, I got mine on Amazon. I don't
Okay,
like to
got it.
support Amazon, but that's where I got it. Yes. Okay. I have to give photo credit on this picture. My amazing friend, Sarah Sheldon from Chicago Botanic Garden took this picture. You can explore tree cookies with chalk. It becomes ephemeral art, and really the child gets hands-on exploring the rings of the tree. They don't even know that they're doing that. But later on in science class, when they're older, they might get introduced to tree rings, and they'll have that hands-on knowledge and that learning experience that they can build upon. And you can see that this child is washing off the colors of the rainbow so that they can reuse their paper as they continue to play with sustainable resources. We engage in discussions all the time with the children about why we are using certain materials that are easy to replenish. And then we can hear them sometimes talking to themselves, with their friends or with their families about resources as they help us plan out their future activities. They get very creatively resourceful. All right, who does not love mud? Talk about an invigorating and sustainable material. Children can explore color mixing and dirt-water ratios. They mix sand and soil with the food colors. I like to use Wilton gel colors. They are more vibrant and they stick in your dirt. And we have super black dirt here in Illinois, so I always have to mix in some sand in order to see those vibrant colors that you see in this picture. And this is their time to experiment with cause and effect. How much water, how much dirt, how much gel, how much sand, and repeat that over and over until they get what they need to get out of that experience. All right, still talking about mud, because that is our favorite topic. Endless possibilities in the mud kitchen in spring. What is already in the space that you're working in? Rocks, wood chips, leaves. Can you add other materials, shells, soil, sand? What is allowed where you're at? Ask the families for donations of old kitchen tools that are no longer being utilized. And here they're learning with and embracing the process of trial and error as they come up with mud pie recipes. I wanted to add that even an old stump that you can see up there in the upper right. I just asked my grounds crew if they could roll that over, and I filled it with soil, and that was the mud source for our mud kitchen. So it was a really cheap and easy way to do that. And then one of my favorite books, Mud. And if you don't already have the CD, I Love My Dandelions, there is a Happy Mud song on there by Annie Nixon that is catchy and will stick in your brain in an earworm forever on an endless loop. Thank me later. Okay, gardening. Yes. So this is one of those long-term explorations that requires daily, well, maybe not daily, but at least weekly care during the 3 seasons, especially. Caring for plants develops that kinship and empathy that we're talking about for the natural world, and that also extends outwards to humans because we are also part of the same natural world. And children could harvest the spring greens for salads. We did that. They even made their own salad dressing. They could share the crops with a local food pantry as part of community action and place-based agency. And this also gives them that hands-on experience with life cycles. And so as the year goes on, they might begin to connect the plant life cycle to the animal life cycle, maybe to the season cycle. And then you've got all the larger systems thinking happening, and that deeper understanding of human connection within a larger ecosystem. And if you don't have raised beds, don't worry. You can use 2-liter bottles on a fence line. You just need to think about maybe smaller plants such as herbs that you could harvest and then utilize in your winter tea. Sheila loves drinking winter tea with her students. And don't forget to drill holes at the bottom for drainage. That's my biggest tip on those. Eagle Scouts like to do things, parents, PTA. There are groups out there who'd be willing to help you take on these types of projects. So think sustainably with your materials. Thank you. Clouds. Okay, this honestly could probably happen in any season. Clouds are everywhere, no matter where you live. They're out your window or above your playground or rooftop garden. And they can provide wonderful ponderings. Like, I wonder how fast they're moving. I wonder why they're moving. I wonder if we can move like a cloud, or what do you think a cloud feels like? Can we make a story about a cloud? What do the clouds look like or remind you of? So tap into those memories or feelings as you get to know your students. I like doing this at the beginning of the year, actually in fall, because then I get to really know them through those kinds of questions. Give them loose parts like cotton balls, cup of water, Q-tip, glue, paint. Get all those senses engaged in open-ended exploration. And of course, that's one of my favorite books. Yeah. Use mirrors and let them trace the clouds. So you can see that girl in the middle is looking at the clouds in the mirror. So it's reflecting up at the sky, which is really cool exploration of perspective for them. And they can draw with like a dry erase marker on there. They can draw the outline of the cloud, and then they can watch as the cloud moves. They notice it's leaving the outline, which is a pretty cool thing to think about. You can compare cloud shapes. What will they look like tomorrow? Will they be the same tomorrow? What is your prediction? Throw in those science terms. Will you be the same tomorrow? Where do you think the cloud will be that you are seeing today? Do you think other children will be looking at the same cloud tomorrow? Ooh, that's pretty deep to think about. Children all over the world looking at that same cloud. I wonder what they'll think about. So if you have those well-placed ponderings, that really could lead to a greater awareness of the larger world. Okay, so during migration, which is happening right now, this happens to be fall migration, but spring migration is happening. Our preschoolers noticed a dead bird below our classroom window, and children are fascinated with this. So we handed out our bird guides, and they identified it as a hermit thrush, and they were super sad that this bird was no longer moving around, flying around, and so they kind of made this very nice bed of soft leaves. It kind of became a burial plot of sorts for the bird. And they were still fascinated about it. So they wanted to check on it the very next day, because, we're exploring death. Does it move? Does it come back? So the very next day they went to look, and the bird was missing. They wondered what happened. And then they noticed another dead bird below the same window. Was it the same bird? They had some amazing storytelling that came out of this and what might have happened and their hypotheses. So what they kind of came up with together, they know what resources we have in our backpack, and they wanted to paint the leg of this bird and put it back in that burial spot and see if it's still there the next time they come. So the weekend passed, they came back, and the bird was missing. Another bird, a different type of bird, was underneath the window, still dead. So we began to wonder out loud. Their teacher, Miss Julie and Miss Lisa, were wondering out loud about what they saw when they looked in the window, and the children really started to think about what they see when they look in the window, and they understood it as a reflection, like a mirror. Wonder what the birds think when they see the reflections. They see grass in the sky, but they don't see the glass. And the children began to understand that the birds see a reality. They think they see a reality of the bird in the sky, which is a really deep concept for children to understand. And that's why the birds were trying to fly through, because they didn't know the glass was there. So They realized the window was a problem. So this realization of the cause and effect spurred an organic community action, and the teachers began to wonder aloud about how they could prevent more birds from hitting the windows. And so the children were like, oh, we can give it a warning. I wonder how we do that. Put up a sign. Oh, I wonder if birds can read. So the teachers began to wonder about breaking up that reflection, and the children thought maybe stickers could do the trick. So they decided to use their voices by drawing their feelings and sending them to our director of facilities. Don't worry, I warned them this was coming. One child drew a picture of the burial plot at the base of the tree, so you can see that in green. And another child drew a picture of their sad face and the sad sun as they gazed upon the dead bird. we had a lot of really interesting artistry going towards our director of facilities. So I called him to give him a heads up. And then the teachers scribed a heartfelt letter from the children asking about collision stickers for the windows. So weeks later, the children got to see the collision stickers get installed. So they learned about the science behind it. And actually, it's not just stickers. They have UV reflective window clings and little dots that he was putting up all over the window that humans can't see, but it alerts the birds to a solid glass wall. And I never even knew that existed. But the children felt heard and empowered, and some of them went home. You can see my little buddy in the red there, and he started putting up signs in his own window at home. So this experience transcended the school property and impacted a larger community as they become agents of change.
Thank you, Megan. Those are always such inspirational stories. So I'm excited to share a little bit about spring, and then I really want to talk with the people that are here. So some of the things, both, Megan and I teach in cities. She's on a lot of acreage, and my program is right in Minneapolis. This is a picture, that's downtown Minneapolis, just right across the river. We moved buildings, and so we're a little further from the river, but we're still very much an urban space. And so we want to make sure that children see all the spaces around them as filled with wonderful nature. So as Megan mentioned, things like storm drains to watch water, and clouds above you, and of course rain. And in Minnesota, we have lots and lots of snow. Even right now, there's so much snow outside. That we have nature everywhere. And so we really want to provide children with regular access to nature, whatever that looks like in their space, and really help them engage and learn to appreciate and acknowledge and respect the nature in their own spaces, but also think about ways that we can help nature. And so this was a hill, and the children had started to plant some things here, and we eventually did a bigger garden. But this was it really early one spring where there was nothing there. And I always think of spring as being a time that is very hopeful, that you can help kind of children and yourself to see hope in something that is going to come in the future. So we take a lot of walks around the campus and around our neighborhood, and children really start to see that nature. One of my favorite walks was, I didn't have to tell the children the difference in types of trees, because we went out with some baskets. They wanted to, excuse me, make some pine cone bird feeders. I was like, oh, well, we're going to need some pine cones. So we went out, and I took them to a place where I knew there were pine cones, and we gathered pine cones. And then they said, excuse me, where can we find more pine cones? Sorry, I had a tickle in my throat. I have to get my water. Okay, sorry about that. So, sorry, I don't know what's happening, but just right now, of course. So anyway, and now my voice sounds weird. Megan, you talk about neighborhood walks. I'm gonna go get some more water.
Oh my goodness, talk about neighborhood walks. What a great place-based activity to get to know what is around your neighborhood. We always take guides or scavenger hunts with us. In fact, I have little scavenger hunt cards that I keep in my backpack, so that the children can hold them and be more participatory as they start to lead the hike. Because the whole idea is once they get used to their neighborhood and comfortable with it, that they can start to take that ownership and start to lead the hikes themselves. Um, Sheila, are you feeling better? I see you smiling.
I am. I don't know. It's just the virtual world. So here I am. I'm
Yeah.
so glad I had my water with me. So anyway, I'm much better, but thank you. And right, neighborhood walks are just a great way to cultivate um, that just sense of joy in getting outside. And also just a change of scenery is always great. So even if you have wonderful spaces on your playground or even beyond there, it's really nice to see the spaces around you, especially if you're located in an urban space. So, so to continue to cultivate a sense of space, we try and think about ways to say yes to children as often as possible. And so sometimes so this picture was in the kind of late spring when we were starting to like talk about our gardens, and then we had to pick weeds and doing all that things. And children ask deep questions about, well, why is it a weed? Like, what are weeds? And I think that that's the thing that we talk with ourselves about, right? Like a weed is a plant that's growing in a place that you didn't wish it would grow, but sometimes it's there doing something really helpful, like helping the soil or helping erosion. And so having those conversations with children can really be great. And to talk about the second bullet talks about exhibiting a sense of care and protection for places, and how weeding is a way where we help protect the balance of nature. And so we know that these things should exist, but in order for these things to exist, we have to kind of help balance that. Because those things are here because we did something to this space. We overtilled the garden, and so now there are more weeds, or we, did these other things, or it's missing nutrients. And so these other plants, they know that, and they can thrive without those nutrients. And so talking with children about those things, I think, can be really interesting, but also just talking with your colleagues about, like, how do we talk to children about weeding in the garden? Usually adults have to do it because the children will just pick stuff. I like letting the children pick the things that are edible, like wood sorrel, because then they know that those are yummy things. But we also have some invasive vines, and so we let the children use those as play props, like boas or scarves or other things. And so we allow them to kind of use those things as a natural resource. They do grow back really, really quickly. So we don't have to worry too much about running out. And then we have several gardens that we utilize around our play space, and we really help children interact with each other, but also a variety of natural elements so that they can kind of compare and contrast. And someone earlier today was talking about that they have poison ivy, and so they say things like leaves of 3, let it be, but then there are strawberries, and it's like, don't leave those be, like you want to dig in. And so instead of just having these like sayings that make things seem like raspberries, those all have leaves of 3, and we want you to get in there and talk about them, but interacting with nature really frequently so that children will start to learn the intricacies of the differences and how because we don't want children to mistake raspberries and poison ivy, but we want them to just be more knowledgeable and more comfortable. And so having adults there that can have those conversations with children about things that are safe or things that are edible or things that are different and the same, and helping children categorize and build relationships with each other while they build relationships with nature. And then, like Megan said earlier, mud, it's just such a part of our day. This is an older picture, but I just love it because, what could be better than a mud puddle and a bunt pan? Also, the creativity alone is just amazing. And so every time he pushes that bunt pan in, it squirts him right in the face. And that is just pure joy. So, thinking about what are the ways that we interact with nature and embrace that process of trial and error, cause and effect, failure and success, all of those things can be really wonderful for children. And then this is the same puddle, but a different group of children realize that when they stick their heads in this puddle and then fling their hair back, mud goes all over the place, and they can have this really wonderful time. And so they spent time just doing that and enjoying it. And so having time for joy while children are also learning things about, the puddle was getting too thin or too low. And so the mud was getting too thick and it wouldn't do the same things before. And so letting children experiment with different types of mud and what it can do can be really joyous as well. And so here's another picture of a child, and this is much thicker mud, and you can see how he's deep in there. This was a really good mud puddle, and we actually had to put in these wooden planks because the mud was so thick that the children were having a hard time getting out. It's also hard as a teacher to get in there and get them. So we put these wooden planks in there so that we could get in and help children, and they just loved it. It kept going throughout the spring into the summer. They wanted to get it wet again. And so just enjoying those things that the different seasons can bring, but also talking about things like water conservation. And so when water isn't readily available anymore, I grew up in the desert, and so talking about water conservation is something that has been really important to me. The valley where I grew up in Las Vegas has a real big problem with water, and it's going to lead to something really bad in the future. And hopefully they will get some rain to at least delay it. But right now that valley is living with an unsustainable population. And so they're working really hard to try and solve that. And we need lots of people to be thinking about water conservation. And so we have, on our old playground, we have a different one here, but there's a water pump, and the children have to work to get water out. So we don't leave water running all day. We don't, have an endless amount, and we want it to be a little bit of work. So the children have to purposefully pump it, and as soon as they stop pumping, the water isn't there anymore. And so we want them to understand how much work it does take. And, we are really fortunate to live in the land of 10,000 or 11,000 lakes, but we also want children to be good global citizens. And so thinking about water use and how we scaffold that understanding is really important. So then we have, when we take time to kind of learn our area and learn about water and learn about what else lives there, we can really lean into our interactions with the land and other people who may know that land in a different way and have a deeper relationship with it, especially if we are new to the land. And so at Minneapolis Nature Preschool, they had an elder that came in and helped them name some of the spaces at the school. And so you can see the Dakota name for this creek, and then of course the English translation is Spring Creek. It's an ephemeral creek, so it's only there in the spring. But the children can learn about that, and they can kind of start to organize that information and understand it, that there's some things that exist only at certain times. And that learning the names of things, or what we call them in the indigenous language, the original language of that space, can be really important. But to have conversations with each other, we might need to learn a common name for it. Or if we just want to get really creative, I think that it's fine for children to also not know the Latin or a common name for something, but to get really creative and think about what would they call it. So sometimes children want to know, like, what's the name of that bird? So we have, ways that children can learn to classify the birds if that's something they're really interested in doing. But it can be more interesting to ask children, what do they notice about the bird? How many of these birds do you think come to our feeder? What different birds do you notice come to our feeder? And hopefully that is cueing children into having just the organization, but also just having a relationship with who else they share this space with. And these are three of our very common birds in our space. And children always have fun names for them. The bird on the left is obviously a robin. One of the children called it my friend Robin. And it was someone that one of my daughters was nannying, and he's like, oh, look, there's my friend Robin. And we would go places, and he's like, oh, there's, my friend Robin. And he's like, my friend Robin goes everywhere that I go. And then one day they were at the park and they were having a little picnic, and there were two robins. And she's like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, he has been thinking this whole time that there's just one that is always where he is. And so anyway, he was like 3 years old, and he said, oh, look, there's my friend Robin and my other friend Robin. And she's like, oh, thank goodness that he knew that that wasn't just one thing, and was able to expand his understanding. But there are many ways that children can interact with these beautiful birds and learn things about them. And then they can explore. You can continue to foster that learning. And so one of our teachers had just this nature alphabet that we have outside, and the children were looking at nests, and the nest on the right-hand side was just from a couple of days ago, and they were making a bunny nest because they had seen some bunny tracks nearby. So continuing to foster that. And then here's a series of photos, and children were really starting to just kind of take their own path. And so they started by having some pretend birds outside, and they were noticing the birds in the trees, and it was spring. And this is what spring looks like in Minnesota. It's just still kind of brown, and there's some snow in the background. But so they started making a nest for the birds on the left. And then, it kind of grew, and then, they're like, oh, then the birds would have eggs, and then they just have this big nest of eggs, and they continue to grow it and progress and just change and think about what happens next. And of course, it's a cycle. And like Megan talked about, those wonderful cycles of life are something that the children, when they have their hands in there, they can really start to explore and to share that with each other, right? The older children talk with the younger children, and the younger children ask really good questions, and it helps the older children build their knowledge and their understanding, and they can do a lot of that planning on their own. So I wanted to share a couple of adult resource books that I have used. There's Flying Wild, and that is, and if you want to get some ideas for activities to help children learn about things like migration, or about the dangers that birds face, like windows in our world. It's mostly written for kind of the K-8 age group, but there are definitely some things, and I've had some success making some of them work really well, especially the obstacle course that is about bird migration. The preschoolers love it so much. So that's one of the activities in that book. And then there's a new book, Trees and Me, and that's by Project Learning Tree. And this is designed for children between 1 and 6, and so it has different ideas. So you can check that out. We have links to them on the research page. On the resource page. And then, just thinking about, you can plan these activities for children, and you can have different things out. And you can even, read wonderful books, but nothing beats hands-on experiences when you're helping to get children from caring about something to taking action for something. And so one of the kind of biggest migrations that I think that, we can all pay a little bit more attention to is amphibian migration. And so in these two pictures, there are children both holding frogs, and you can see the difference in size. And when the little toads, like Olivia has on the right side, are there, it can be really hard for those animals, big or small, to cross roads to get to the places that they need to be. And so there's the big night, the amphibian migration. I put a link in the chat of a little video for adults about what the amphibian migration looks like, and ways that you can help, and that children can help. And I've heard wonderful stories about children helping with this, or even whole families going out on the big night, which is a night above freezing, that's rainy, when the frogs and salamanders, newts, where everyone's trying to make it back to their breeding ponds. And so ways that you can help. And so I have one more slide, and it is, these are not books to learn about frogs and toads at all. But they are playful, engaging ways to talk to children about other things. And I, in particular, since we were talking about spring, some of my very favorite spring stories are in these books. And again, you're not going to learn anything about frogs or toads, but the story about the garden and about being patient, waiting for seeds. There's one called Spring in the middle book, and then there's one called The Corner, where it's a saying. Adults have sayings all the time, like spring is just around the corner, or this is just around the corner. But children, like Frog and Toad, don't really understand some of those concepts. And so they keep looking around the corner, and then finally they see some signs of spring. And sometimes this leads us in our walks to go take, like, let's go look around some corners in our neighborhood and look for signs of spring. So you don't have to limit yourself to nonfiction books to explore nature. You can look at books, fiction books like these or other ones. And so we just invite you in the chat to share any of your favorite books about spring. They could be fiction or nonfiction that you would like to share with us today. And then we still have 9 minutes for questions, which is what we were hoping would happen, because sometimes we run out of time. So we both hopefully didn't talk too fast, but talked just fast enough to be able to leave some time for questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just invite a time for